Okay, let's talk about Tony Blair, the rise of the Labor Party, and the return to a conservative government. So, John Major was weak. There was a new round of elections that were held, and Tony Blair uh, becomes the prime minister in 1997. And you see people kind of refer to what Blair does as being the new Labor Party, right? They didn't change the name, they just kind of reinvented themselves. That he attempted to create a new coalition of individuals who kind of believed in things that the Labor Party traditionally believed in, right? But not necessarily to the extent of the more command style economic policies that existed shortly after World War II. So he stopped focusing on being the party solely of labor unions and starts increasing ties with businesses and finding ways to uh, reverse some of the neoliberal trend without alienating businesses. And he was fairly successful in terms of creating that coalition. So some of the things that he notably did during his 10-year reign as the prime minister, first he devolved more authority to Scotland and Wales. So of the different countries in the United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland all have their own individual parliaments, but Scotland and Wales are were far less powerful than the national government of the UK, the parliament that's housed in London, England. So you see him increase some authority for the Scottish and Welsh parliaments to be able to deal with their regional issues. He calls for the creation of an elected mayor and an elected council for the city of London instead of Parliament just making decisions for the capital district. He got rid of voting rights for hereditary peers in the House of Lords, which meant the people who were part of the House of Lords because their family had had a seat passed through their family lineage forever lost their ability to have sway or influence. He incorporates the United Nations Convention on Human Rights into British law, so there are now more protections of human rights that are treated now as part of their system of common law. He roots out a clause of the party's constitution that says that they want to call for ownership of the commons, right? This very, very socialist notion of controlling all of the means of production. He passed a Freedom of Information Act in the same way that the United States has one, where people can now petition the government for any kind of information, and that information is made public through FIA requests. But his ultimate demise, and the reason why he's pushed out in 2007, is he's seen as George W. Bush's lapdog, right? That he dives into being part of the coalition of the willing that participates in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's the war in Iraq that really drags him down. That you are seen as, he's seen as just being a puppet, and does nothing but repeats kind of the message of the George W. Bush administration on a war that Britons didn't believe that they should be involved in whatsoever. So this is a clip from his final prime minister's questions, where he gives his resignation speech, and people applaud him out of the room. 2010 becomes kind of an interesting year in the United Kingdom, because the Conservative Party wins a plurality of seats in the election, but the way a parliamentary system works is to be able to name a prime minister, a party either A, needs to have an outright majority, or B, you have a coalition formed, which is two or more political parties that give the coalition a majority of the number of seats. So what David Cameron has to do after the 2010 elections is create a coalition with the third highest party in the United Kingdom in terms of number of seats in the House of Commons, which is the Lib Dems. So Cameron mainstreams the party a bit more. He believes in some of the neoliberal style elements that Margaret Thatcher and conservatives before him did, but not necessarily that hard line of a stance. He attempted to reach out more to youth to get individuals, younger individuals, to support the Conservative Party when they traditionally had supported Labor more. But like I said, in 2010, we have a hung parliament, which meant no party had a majority. So we have Nick Clegg, the gentleman who's on the right of this picture, who's the leader of the Liberal Democrats, who forms a coalition with Cameron. And there are a lot of odd elements to this coalition because the Conservatives and the Lib Dems are diametrically opposed on a couple of large issues. But in creating some promises and some shared framework agreements between these two parties, he appoints Nick Clegg, the leader of the Lib Dems, the deputy prime minister, right, the number two in the chain of command. He elects some prominent Lib Dems into other cabinet level positions to try and find ways for this to work together. So if we look at the results of the 2010 parliamentary elections, right, we can see that you need 326 seats to have a majority, to be able to win. And the Conservatives picked up 97 seats in that election. Hey, buddy. And they were still short. So to hit that 326, right, if the Conservative Party partied or partnered up with the Lib Dems, right, they are over that 326 threshold. But to get anywhere else, the like the Lib Dems or the Labor Party to build their coalition would have to partner up with literally every other party that does not, agree with the Labor Party. So you see the first and the third highest ranking number of seats work together. Can I turn this down? Make it not so loud. There you go. So they work together to create this coalition government. So to create this coalition, they create some elements to kind of minimize big society. So they take some wide-ranging initiatives to increase more power to ordinary citizens, right? More public devolution to individual rights, more power to individual communities or individual citizens. Can you say hi, Charlie? You see yourself? Can you say hi? Okay. But you also see a push for austerity, right? A call to reduce public spending, to reduce deficits, and this led to a decrease of funding for welfare programs, for the national health system, for education programs, right? And you see that there are a lot of people who were not happy with that. David Cameron was fairly ruthless in prime minister's questions, and this is one of the things that we'll talk about during office hours. You want this, buddy? But if you remember the old thug life meme that floated around the internet for a while, here's an example of some of the clapbacks you would hear from Prime Minister Cameron during PMQs and things like that in the House of Commons. In 2015, they have another round of elections, and the Conservative Party wins. the majority of the seats that they need. And one of the reasons why Cameron is successful is he campaigns on allowing the citizens to have an in-out referendum on the European Union. They'll get to vote, and people came out and supported that. He also campaigned on continued austerity measures to attempt to stop deficits from spiraling out of control. And he ultimately then calls for the Brexit referendum to happen. And here's where this becomes problematic for him. He promises the referendum, and then towards the end of the campaigning about whether or not they should leave, he starts making arguments about how the UK should stay in the European Union. This vote happens, and you can see through a fairly narrow margin of 1.3 million votes, they vote to leave the European Union. And there are a lot of people who believe that that was a bad decision, and there are still a lot of people who question why in the heck Cameron allowed that vote to happen, why he would promise it. So after someone who starts campaigning on the no team of no, they shouldn't leave the European Union, he resigns because he does not believe he can be a credible negotiator in the name of getting Britain out of the European Union. So this leads to a round of elections for a new Conservative Party leader, which leads to Theresa May becoming the new party head. So what happens if you look at this graphic from the BBC on the right? If there is a single candidate who is proposed to be the leader of the party, then that person automatically becomes the party. If there are two candidates, then they mail out a ballot to the wider members of the Conservative Party and send that out for election, and the winner of that mail ballot of Conservative Party members, then they become the leader. If there are three or more candidates, then only Conservative members of Parliament get to vote. And then when they get down to two, there is the option to then get everybody to vote. So what happened in terms of Theresa May becoming the party leader and then, becoming the party leader and then becoming the prime minister, you can see in terms of the first poll, or this step of the image, the Conservative MP's vote, she walks away with a majority of the first round ballot. So what happened after that first vote is that the bottom two were eliminated. So you lose Liam Fox and the whole 16 people who voted for him, and Stephen Crabb and the whole 34 people who voted for him. And you're left with Theresa May, Andrea Lansom, and Michael Gove. Once they get down to three candidates, the members of Parliament, the Conservative MPs vote again, and Theresa May walks away again with a larger majority of the support of members of Parliament. And then when the broader ballot to the 150,000 members of the Conservative Party go out, she wins a high percentage of that vote. So what she attempts to do in terms of creating a larger coalition of conservatives to vote to leave the European Union, she calls for a new system of elections. So members of Parliament are elected for up to 5-year terms. And the way that this is interpreted in the United Kingdom is that every 5 years, the United Kingdom has to have elections. But either the prime minister or members of parliament can call for elections in terms of votes of confidence or no confidence. So in the wake of her becoming the Conservative Party leader, but there being some problems in Parliament getting to vote on a package to leave the European Union, she calls for elections in believing that she'll win more Conservatives. And if there are more Conservative MPs in Parliament, then she'll be successful in getting her leave package through. But the result of those elections is that the Conservative Party actually lost some seats, making it more difficult to get a Brexit initiative through the House or through the House of Commons. So after those elections, right, there's a great deal of egg on Theresa May's face that, you know, when she loses those seats, she loses power or influence. You start having people from the Conservative Party, you also start having members of her cabinet start publicly releasing information or publicly questioning whether or not Theresa May can be effective. And that's something that's just not done in this system of politics, right? That we'll talk about this notion of the mass line, that you can disagree with the prime minister, you can disagree with the decision, but once a decision is made in a cabinet level meeting, everybody toes the line. So as she's dealing with defections, as she's dealing with members of her cabinet resigning, she ultimately also has to step out of power. And through the same kind of process that Theresa May went through to become the Conservative Party leader, in July 2019, we see the ascent of Boris Johnson to becoming the prime minister, using that exact same process that May went through to be elected the Conservative Party leader. Boris Johnson went from being a backbencher in Parliament, meaning that he was not seen as someone in a position of power, to becoming the mayor of London, to becoming one of the loudest voices in terms of embracing the Leave campaign from the European Union. And he makes the argument that he will successfully create a package to get Britain out, right? He does it, right? A couple weeks ago is when the Leave package officially passed the British House of Commons, initiating the formal contractual agreements for them to get their way out of the European Union. And one of the things that we'll look at in the next set of notes is what Boris Johnson has kind of done to make policy recently. The last couple of slides, if you want more information on either the history of the British Empire or British political history in general, you can check out those couple of notes. But in terms of the making of the modern British state, that's about everything that you need to know. And in the next set of notes for the United Kingdom, we'll start looking at governance and policy making. We'll start talking about the role of the Queen. We'll start talking about how something becomes an act of Parliament in terms of looking at how logistically most of this stuff works. All right, have a good one.